So, welcome back to the E-Talking podcast. This is the edition that comes after the Paris E-Prix, and it was panic on the streets of Paris, but French Frines takes it with relish. We'll talk about Robin Frines' first win, and also the first ever wet and the first ever ice raining Formula E race. Does this mean that we still need the Andros Trophy, or can Formula E replace it? Maximise your points. Maxi Gunter gets in the points with 5th. Does this mean he's going to stay for the rest of the season? Nissan ain't going to shine anymore. What is it that Nissan need to do to actually complete a race at the front? Gotta catch them all. What's the reason behind so many Formula E fans also being fans of sci-fi, anime and other such topics? We'll talk about that. And will Sebastian Buemi ever be happy again? That's a very simple question with a very complicated answer. And finally, blue sky thinking. What's behind Neo's improvement in Paris, and can it be sustained, or is it a flash in the pan? Okay, well, to talk about this, I've got Conrad O'Keefe, who's in his radio room at uni, I believe. So, hi, Conrad.
Hi.
And first of all, was that the most chaotic race that you've seen in Formula E, or can you think of others?
I would certainly say that it is, and that's all thanks to the hail shower. That was an incredible sight because, as we know, we've not even seen rain in a Formula E race before. So seeing hail was something quite different, and the drivers looked completely unable to cope with it. Obviously, they're just not used to this, and it caught them by surprise.
Well, yeah, I mean, I live in a country where it is sometimes customary to have hail showers in April, but not on not on April the 27th though. So that was a surprise to everyone, I think, particularly to Jack Nicholls in the commentary box, who just seemed to be stunned into a kind of catatonia, shouting "Hail, hail!" while people around him tried to fill in with words. So that was amazing. But I mean, Is this a clear sign that Formula E's mission of combating climate change actually has some purpose? Because, you know, that's climate change, isn't it?
Yeah, you could definitely say so. Back to Jack Nicholls, he's always best when he's in a mood like that, when he's all pent up, and it makes it so much better because he's such a wild commentator that you really feel the emotion through him, which is a good contrast with Dario Franchitti, who was incredibly laid back and chills out the mood. It's a nice contrast.
Absolutely, and I see Dario's on the TV doing some kind of car mod show, which I haven't seen yet. But it's nice to know that TV producers are sort of catching on to his Scottish Italian cool and using him for other things now, because I think he's got a good way about him.
Yeah, he certainly does, and he's also incredibly down to earth. Think of the IndyCar career he's had, and for someone who's had such a great career, he's incredibly humble about himself and very reasoned. He doesn't have an ego to him in the same way that many other drivers who have stepped out of Formula One, IndyCar with the careers that they've had do have about them.
And he does not look a day over 30 either, which, I'd love to know.
Yeah, he's kept himself in shape.
Exactly. I'd love to know where the picture is in his attic anyway, because looks amazing for whatever age he is. But anyway, enough Dario Franchitti love. What were the main talking points for you of the race? Frines obviously took his first win, and after struggling around in the Amlin and Andretti for so long, it must come as a relief to him to be on the top step. But he's now also leading the championship. I mean, does that come as a surprise to you? And can he build on this, or will it be another leader next time?
One thing about Formula E that makes me not surprised when the likes of Andre Lotterer and Robin Frines lead championships is that it's one of the prime series where you can go under a radar not having won a race, and the consistency can carry you to the top spot. Because you think about how many drivers that have won a race and then either underperformed or ran into bad luck the next weekend, and it throws everything up. Because look at Jean-Eric Vergne, he's not been able to string a consistent amount of form together. Neither has Sebastian Buemi, who hasn't even really got going. Lucas Di Grassi, he's not been able to. Those big hitters, those experienced names, haven't really been able to do that. So then when a driver is able to string podiums together consistently, even if they're not the big results that catch the eye, they're still able to work themselves into these positions. Look at Jerome D'Ambrosio as well. He might have got that win earlier on, so it's not quite comparable. But he's also in that hunt due to his consistency and the fact that he's able to play the margins. And I think Frains and Lotter have done that impressively well this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And D'Ambrosio, and as Dilbag Gill said, it was reported he said he wasn't a great qualifier. I think what he intended to say was he's more consistent in races, but he's generally brought the car home whenever it's been possible in races, which is saying an awful lot given the number of crashes in Formula E this season. And he's actually shown a decent turn of speed for someone who was expected to be number 2 to Verlaine by most people, including me.
Yeah. I thought that it was going to be incredibly close between the Mahindra pair, because although Pascal Wehrlein is seen as the driver that will have the highest ceiling of talent if we're going to go by Formula One results, whereas Jérôme D'Ambrosio had that 1 year with Virgin and didn't really impress. But Pascal Wehrlein obviously managed to impress in his 2 years there, one with the same team. I thought it was going to be incredibly close because even though Jérôme did move to Mahindra this season, for Pascal, he's still going to be going against someone who has five seasons of experience now. It's walking into the bear pit for him, but he's been incredibly impressive too. He's taken 2 pole positions. Obviously, one was taken away from him, but it was still impressive to take it in the first place.
Yeah, Virgin Racing in Formula One had some incredibly talented drivers and didn't really use them to their best effect. I mean, Lucas Di Grassi was there for a season. He complained recently. He's always complaining on Twitter, but he complained recently on Twitter that one of the reasons why Virgin didn't work out for him, and I believe him on this actually, is because he's always been a relatively very tall driver, and it's the whole Gerhard Berger thing. He had to lose so much weight that he wasn't really being that strong in the car. And also they had Timo Glock, who's turned out to be decent in DTM recently as well.
Yeah, I definitely believe Lucas on that one as well, because you look at many drivers. I mean, Nico Hülkenberg's a prime example. Drivers who were taller, built in a certain fashion, have had to lose a lot of weight in the past. And also look at Virgin's initial struggles in Formula One, where they had the issue with the fuel tank. I could completely understand if there were issues with that car and how it molds around a certain driver. I definitely would have put that past being true. But yeah, back to Formula E. I've been incredibly impressed by Robin Frains, Andre Lotterer, just that consistency that they're able to pull together, especially in teams that are still struggling to put that consistency together overall, because look at Sam Bird and Jean-Eric Verne. They've been the big hitters during some certain races where they've got the higher results and seen as the de facto leaders of the team. But then you look at the number 2 drivers where less of the media spotlight's on them and they're able to just do their own thing rather quietly, and it really seems to be working for them.
And what about Maxi Gunter? We talked about him in the last podcast, but he's been absolutely tremendous ever since he came back in the Dragon. Obviously, he had that collision on the first lap in Rome, but he qualified pretty well there, as did Jose Maria Lopez. But in Paris, I really felt this was the first time that he put all the parts together in a race, really. And for a guy who's come out of Formula 2, I think it's quite understandable that he would take so long to adapt. But it's just that being in a team where he was being swapped out of the seat and replaced by Felipe Nasr, obviously it didn't help him to adapt. And I felt like, this race was the first time we really saw, the extent of his potential in taking that Dragon up to 5th, and also in avoiding collisions and bringing it home in the end in what was an incredibly difficult race. But what was your opinion on Maxi Gunter's performance yesterday?
My opinion on Maxi Gunter overall is that he absolutely needs to stay in that Dragon seat. He is an incredibly impressive driver, and he showed that to full effect yesterday when he managed to qualify 7th in a Dragon car, which has been incredibly inconsistent, not necessarily slow, as we saw in Rome last time out, but that was still an impressive performance. And yeah, in the race, being able to take 5th was just a stunning result and something that Dragon really needed. And one thing I want to say is Jose Maria Lopez, as impressive as he is, he's 36 now. He's not going to go on forever. Dragon need to look for a new leader of the team. And why look around for, say, drivers that are left without teams when they've got a young starlet right there that they can mould into shape, someone who can lead that team for years and years to come? That's if he doesn't impress so much, in fact, that another series, even a Formula One team, are interested. Because Maxi Gunter, and I've seen him through Formula 3 and Formula 2, he is a genuine talent. Not always been able to show it, but he has a high ceiling of talent. And Dragon need to focus on being able to take the best out of him, because there's going to be a new wave of younger drivers hitting Formula E. And if they want to be ahead of the curve and try and find a certain way to get themselves in amongst the front runners, that is one way to do it.
I suppose if they are going to struggle to hold on to Maxi Gunter, then it's really a case of how to retain your Dragon driver. Sorry, I've already got my coat on. Don't worry. I'm already calling the taxi. No worries. But I mean, he has been one of the more impressive younger drivers this season for sure, and I still feel like Jose Maria Lopez looks like a guy who believes for whatever reason that his seat is under threat. He was a bit knocked off when he wasn't given the testing slot and they gave it to I've forgotten the name of the Italian test driver now. But they gave him a day in the seat on the post race test after Santiago rather than Lopez, and he felt, well, I need the track time right now, so. Perhaps another team might have taken another decision, but I've been quite critical of Dragon recently. I want to try to avoid being so, because I read on eRacing 365 that they are moving to a new base in Silverstone. They're talking to major manufacturers about possibly coming in the future. There were talks with Honda, although they fell through because Honda want to win in Formula 1 before they get to Formula E. But do you think that Dragon could be a good partner for a third party, partner for a manufacturer, or do you think it's better that manufacturers come in on their own like Porsche are doing?
Do I think Dragon would be perfect for a manufacturer to come in? Working in a partnership, no. That's to put it blunt. That's nothing against Dragon. I know that they're putting a lot of effort into their Formula E project, as shown by working on a new base. But there's just so much carnage around that team and so much indecision that if I was a manufacturer looking for a team to invest in, I think I'd rather go it alone than work with a team like Dragon, who it seems like there'd be a culture clash there. Not necessarily in the same way that McLaren had with Honda or something like that. More that, think of a manufacturer that's trying to instill a bit of calm and a bit of direction. When you're working hand in hand with a team like Dragon, that is not an easy thing to do. It seemed to me like a BMW Williams kind of situation.
Yeah, except that BMW Williams, I think, worked because they both drew red lines. Williams said we're only accepting you as a supplier, and BMW seemed happy with that and didn't really talk too much about buying into the team. So
it was supposed to work like that in principle, but eventually the blame game started around 2003, 2004, when the 2003 title went down the drain, which was in part thanks to inefficiency when it came to developing the car and not always the right resources in the right places. BMW got incredibly miffed by that. They were an exclusive engine supplier, and obviously they did have an important partnership with Williams at that time, and felt that there was a culture clash going on because BMW had worked incredibly hard on that engine and it had become the class of the field. That's what I'm thinking if a manufacturer works with Dragon. If their instability and their internal carnage means that they can't create a race-winning chassis, that won't be the case right now, but who knows in the future which way Formula E decides to go. But the things that Dragon are able to control, if their instability goes against that, then it won't be long before a manufacturer starts to wonder, are we doing the right thing here? Because we're doing everything well on our side.
The reason why I think it speculatively could work is because if you have a manufacturer such as, say, Kia or Hyundai that doesn't have necessarily the really huge manufacturer infrastructure to go in and just know how to win races from the start. I mean, admittedly, Dragon isn't a race winning operation right now, and it hasn't been historically in Formula E, but have they got the team infrastructure to take a relatively inexperienced manufacturer forward, well, I think they possibly could. And I think if you put the level of finances that someone like Hyundai has into a team like Dragon, and also make a few sort of changes, like bringing in real top technical talent from other forms of motorsports, then you might have a winning operation there.
It's always possible, and when it comes to a, let's not say smaller but less expansive corporation, say Kia, Hyundai, I think that's more understandable because they'll find partnerships harder and harder to come across. But it's kind of a shifting slide here, because the smaller the manufacturer that you're working with is, the less desirable it becomes for that team to have to compromise with the fact that they're working alongside a manufacturer, that there's going to be disagreements along the road. I still think it would be desirable for Dragon in the current state that they're in a situation like that. But it's not as much of a done deal as, say, if BMW decided they wanted to switch from Andretti for some reason, or a new manufacturer came in that isn't already in, like Honda themselves.
Yeah. Okay, well, from a team that exits Paris with optimism to a team that exits Paris with its tails between its legs, Nissan again grabs defeat from the jaws of victory at the weekend, and we have to ask why. I mean, Oliver Rowland went off with a mysterious problem, which he apologised for immediately, and he seemed to believe that it was completely his fault, but there were echoes of the braking stroke throttle issues that Sebastian Buemi had in 2 or 3 races prior to this, and we can only speculate as to whether the dual motor in the Nissan power unit is causing issues for drivers in terms of shaking speed off the car. But should it be a worry to Nissan anyway that they're getting so many of these issues where drivers are just not slowing down for corners? I'm not sure about the issues that are plaguing Nissan and why they're happening, but it's definitely incredibly damaging to them, because quite honestly, I think that car is definitely good on pace. I mean, I feel like I've been overrating it a little bit lately, because since Santiago, we've only seen brief flashes of that. But that Nissan car looks unstable. It looks like it's hamstrung by a major issue, because even Sebastian Buemi, who was up to season 3, an incredibly cool, calm, collected driver behind the wheel, apart from in some wheel-to-wheel situations, he was able to maximise that package, and all of a sudden he can't get his head around it. And Oliver Rowland, as we know, is an incredibly capable driver himself. He's already shown that this season. He's also beginning to struggle with it quite a lot as well. I do certainly think that there's something wrong behind the scenes, and it won't be an easy fix, because if it was, then it had been nipped in the bud about a month prior. Yeah, I mean, when Hazel Southwell, who I always bow down to in terms of her knowledge of the sport, came into the podcast in edition number 2, she talked about how Dams struggled last season because Jean-Paul Drio, their founder and CEO, was seriously ill for much of the season, so wasn't available for to come to the races. Now he's making his presence felt at times, and I believe he was in Paris because obviously he lives locally, but I don't believe he's at every race, and I wonder if maybe it's a question of Nissan making their presence felt more over a number of seasons, because they although you could easily say that they've switched over from Renault and it's the same organisation, they do have new management there, don't they?
Yeah. That's for certain. I do think that has some degree of an effect, and I think that some people might understate it more than it really should be, because, again, we talk about culture clash. You're going from a situation where you've had engineers for, like around a certain area, and then there's plenty of engineers from other areas now coming into the team, and then there's also Nissan, who have their own values. They might work with Renault as part of the Renault-Nissan alliance, but they have their own way of doing things, and that can change the mood in around a place, because the people you've worked with before, the mindset, the known way of doing things that are set into your head, if that changes and Nissan decide to stamp their authority on the team and try and change things to their liking, that can take a lot of time before people get responsive to it, staff within the team. So that could be a major playing behind it. And also with key figures missing through illness or whatever else, it almost gives Nissan carte blanche, because they can start to stamp their authority without key figures maybe saying, like, putting their hand around and saying, right, you might be doing things a bit too soon here. They're not really responding to it.
Yeah, this is true. I also think that Nissan needs to be winning in Formula E, because the Nissan Leaf is just such a successful and decent car. I mean, it's my electric car on choice when I need a hire car to go to places,
yeah.
And it's obviously it's a bit overpriced compared to the majority of Ford Focus size cars, but it is a very good car, and it's obviously the best selling electric car in the world. And I feel like if Nissan does well in e-racing, then they can really be seen as the brand leader, and be seen as the thought leaders in EVs as well. But I mean, aside from that, I feel like also they are wasting the best driver in Formula E over the first 4 seasons, Sebastian Buemi, by not giving him a regular winning car. Saying that, he was going to win yesterday until it looked like Robin Freins cut his rear tyre, causing a puncture. What did you make of that? And was it a racing incident? Because obviously they've had their run-ins before.
I'd probably say it was a racing incident. I didn't actually see too much of it, so I can't say that with 100% conviction behind me. But from what I saw, I mean, it seemed like there was many racing incidents within that race. There was a lot going on, so... Yeah. One thing that I do want to get back to is the pressure that, as you mentioned, with Nissan and how they're a global leader in electric vehicles, especially with the Leaf, the pressure that's probably been put on those staff with the media surrounding this team, understandably so, because of the first 4 seasons and how impressive Renault Edams were. Nissan have taken over a Renault Edams team, which up to that point is the most successful team in Formula E history. And the company that is taking them over is the company that made the Nissan Leaf. If it weren't for the Tesla Model S, would be the first electric car that comes into someone's mind. There is no doubt that puts the internal organisation under pressure, because it makes it even more crucial that they get off to a flying winning start.
Yeah, very true. But I mean, we've talked about Buemi before on this podcast, and he's still clearly got the pace to win. He's still clearly got the racing nous to win, but it's just not come together for him this season. And I kind of joked about being back on board the bottle train when he binned it in Santiago, but that turned out to be a technical stroke braking issue in itself. And now, of course, he was forced to the back of the field by his tyre being cut. It's just not going together for him how he'd like. What does he need to do to win?
What he did need to do, I reckon, was keep it on the road in Santiago, to be honest. I think it's dented his confidence a little bit since then, and the issue is bad results breed bad results. Especially in Formula E, you can lose your way. Ever since Santiago, a lot of bad lucks also struck in him, but think about, was it Hong Kong or Sanya where he crashed in qualifying?
Yeah, I think it was Sanya.
Yeah, that was a major mistake, and that signalled to me a loss of confidence, also probably brought on by the braking issue as well. I do think it comes into play that I don't think he can particularly trust that car, especially after what happened in Santiago, where he obviously binned it. And I don't think he trusts that the team infrastructure's at the most capable they can be, because he's probably experienced a more slickened outfit over the first 3 seasons of Formula E, and it's coming over to rocky waters with ownership change and whatever else. There's a lot of outside variables that are probably denting his confidence, and then there's also the braking issues, and it just becomes like such a small window to be able to get the best out of that Nissan car, and even someone of Buemi's talents is struggling to be able to do it. That's why I find Ollie Rowland so impressive this season. The fact that although he's had the same struggles and not being able to string the results together, the fact that he's managed to keep, like, within touching distance of Seb Buemi and not fall back, I think is quite impressive, especially given the internal turbulence.
Incredibly impressive as well, given that Sebastian Buemi essentially, as we discussed in podcast number 2, had to do the first few tests himself because Alex Albon decided Toro Rosso was a better option for him in Formula One. So Roland came in with about a week or two to spare before the Algeria race, and he just seemed to take no. He just seems to take no time at all to adapt, and he obviously done a couple of races in the Gen 1 car, but this was, to all intents and purposes, his first proper experience of Formula E. And, I mean, how impressive is it that he's been able to adapt so quickly and seem like a potential winning driver right away?
One of the most impressive rookie seasons that I've seen so far, which is quite strange given the lack of results that would be seen, like if you just take the time boards and point standings. But for me, him and Pascal Wehrlein, given that they've had such a disrupted first season in outfits that have some pressure around them because they're successors, Mahindra less so, but definitely with Nissan. And I just find it incredibly impressive that he's managed to gel so well with that team and be able to integrate himself and prove himself against, as you said, what could be argued reasonably as the best Formula E driver over the last 4 seasons. And I just find that mind-boggling that he's been able to be able to adjust to things so quickly in Formula E. And even though he had those 2 races, I believe it was like 2 or 3 races in Formula E in a Gen 1 car, that's a fairly long time ago. I believe that was around 2015-16 when he did those. Right. He's had 2 years away from it then, and a lot's changed in Formula E. It's a ever-adapting sport, so I find it incredibly impressive that he's managed to come back in and really prove himself.
Well, yeah, definitely, and it's also his first time in a genuine top car as well. So fair play to him, and really. I wouldn't say he's underrated because lots of people are talking about him, but we haven't talked about him enough on this podcast, and I haven't written about him enough on my site either. So it's something to correct. Certainly, I feel like there are other glitzier drivers who have either come in this season or who have. And obviously, when you compare him to someone like Pascal Wehrlein is bound to get more press because of his F1 experience and because of his Mercedes connections. But yeah, Roland's been fantastic this season, and fair play to the guy, especially since I believe he's never had huge amounts of money below him like certain drivers, and he's done a superb job to come from where he did to where he is, I think.
Oh yeah, certainly so. He's not had the level of backing that other drivers have had, and it's also quite arguable that if he did have that backing, say the kind of backing that Julian Palmer did, obviously he had his father behind him, but that kind of level of funding, it's not completely out of the question that even Oliver Rowland would have made it to Formula One. There were F1 teams that were willing to give him testing roles like Williams last year. So yeah, he's a high caliber of driver.
He's almost in the same box as the driver that Hazel interviewed last week, Alex Lynn, who, of course, was a Williams Academy driver for some time.
Yes, for test driver for 2 years as well, and he was also incredibly impressive. He won GP3 with Red Bull before he switched to the Williams Academy.
Yeah, and then went on to get pole position, I think, in his first race in Formula E. Had a bit of a struggle in season 4 though, and still looks to be feeling his way in with the Gen 2 car, having had 20 minutes of testing before Rome. But do you imagine that we will see the best of Alex Lynn as we go through the European season?
I think he'll gel better with Jaguar Racing than DS Virgin, because that DS Virgin team, when it was coming into the last throws between obviously Virgin and DS, knowing that DS will be leaving for Techeetah, there was already a story, I believe, that Hazel posted on Twitter, and I find it incredibly intriguing, at the end of season 3, where they knew that DS were looking to join Techeetah and decided to ditch Jose Maria Lopez, who was a driver there because Citroën backed him. that must have made things pretty nervy, the fact that they were willing to do that for season 4 whilst all of that was going on. And I'd imagine that someone like Alex Lynn could have quite easily been caught in the crossfire, and that would have done things to his confidence. It'll have just been the fact that Citroën will have been watching Renault and Audi be able to nail it together for the first 3 seasons, and probably looking at the Virgin outfit where they were always the bridesmaid but never the bride. Whereas Techeetah instantly came in with customer power units and were in and around the pace of that Virgin car. Because you have to think, were it not for Sam Bird and some of his heroics in season 3 and 4, where the true pace of that car really lied.
I wonder how much as well the relative success of the Virgin team this season is down to the changes at the top. Now, Sylvain Philippe was the technical boss, still is, I believe, running the technical team on a kind of dual role basis, but he's become team principal. It was meant to be a caretaker thing while they found a permanent member of staff, but he's basically become the de facto permanent team principal now. Previously, they had Alex Ty, who before he worked with the Virgin F1 team was in charge of global cabin crew training, I believe, for Virgin Airways. So, how much do you think having a genuine, hard-bitten technical specialist in charge has helped Virgin?
Oh, it's absolutely crucial. The main thing that I think's helped Virgin, especially this season, is because they give me the Formula E equivalent of the Red Bull vibe during the early Renault years, where although Renault pulled out of Formula One, just to supply engines and mainly to Red Bull were that team where as long as they got the customer engine and it was performing incredibly well, they didn't need anything else. They could handle everything in-house because they had such a sleek, incredible outfit. And that's why I feel like Virgin are going from strength to strength now that DS has left for Techeetah. Techeetah need DS to go along with them to give them that financial backing to be able to maintain competitiveness after that season 4 title win from Vern. Whereas Virgin can keep in there, in and about. And I feel like since DS left them, it's been taking the toxicity out of the snake bite. They're a team that I feel are like Red Bull in that is, as long as Audi just give them a power plant that works perfectly and they can do a job with it, they can go out there and beat Audi. They can go out there and win things.
I feel as well like the whole ethos of the Virgin company ever since it started has been to be independent from the big boys. I mean, effectively, if you look at
it's their culture.
And I mean, if you look at what they've done with the trains, obviously they've become the big boys to challenge, and they've actually been quite protectionist in terms of what they've done with the UK train market. But then in airlines, in cola, radio, they've always been they've always got off on being the small player trying to challenge the big boys through being more efficient, and it feels like they've got back to that Branson mindset this season.
Yeah, it's been absolutely brilliant for them, and it's brilliant to see as well because we're seeing a slicker, more organised Virgin outfit that's having a lot less internal conflicts, difference of opinion, and it's just them getting on with it. There's less outside influences, there's less variables that are having a knock-on effect on their confidence and their ability to be able to stay at the top. It's just wonderful to see because they're really starting to hook it together, and they've got 2 brilliant drivers. They're a lot more focused. And Virgin are where they need to be because they've been there since season 1 as well. They're what you could see as one of the classic teams already. And it's important that we see those fighting at the top.
Would you still see Sam Bird as their most likely competitor for the championship, given that he's been consistently at the top over the last 4.5 seasons, or should we not write off Franz's chance of actually taking this through to the end?
I actually can't even call it. If you're talking on natural talent and those big results, if they can do the effect at the end of the season, then Sam Bird. But I honestly can't rule Robin Frains out because he's been going under the radar. He's been taking the results that he needs to, whether the headline grabbing results or not, and who knows how long that could last.
Right. Just taking a bit of a left turn in a moment and talking about some tangential but related Formula E topics. But before we do that, there was a big improvement in qualifying for the Neo team relative to where they had been. In Rome, they were easily the slowest cars on the grid, and Tom Dillman qualified 11th and could have easily finished in the points if not for a mistake on the moisture when it started to get wet. Oliver Turvey was behind him, but made improvements too. I mean, are we looking at a general improvement for the Neo team, and can we expect that to continue into Monaco and Berlin, or was this a flash in the pan based on it being Tom Dillman's home race and based on him performing better for that reason? What do you think?
I'm probably going to put it down as a flash in the pan, but I hope I'm proven wrong. I just don't see how one of, if not the craziest Formula E race we've seen so far, where plenty was happening on each and every lap, can really be taken as much of a trustworthy result that really reflects Neo's progress, because it could be easily seen as everything went crazy and they were able to look in by being at the right place at the right time. If it was a more regular Formula E race and they showed natural pace that was up there, then I could understand. The qualifying performances did improve slightly. Although Dillman was around where he usually is, I was quite impressed by the upturning performance from Oliver Turvey. So that is a promising sign, but that's really all I can go on. I can't really take much out of the race.
Yeah. I think maybe the difference in the race for Dillman, who did make a driver error which led to him retiring from the race, was probably similar to... I can explain this best by saying if you play one of the Codemasters F1 games with full AI in a single player mode, then you learn to drive in a certain way. And then when you go through to the online open lobby and you've got all these real people doing strange and unexpected things, you just have to drive differently. And I feel that it must have been a different kind of racing that's needed, going round at the back and challenging the dragons, to, being sandwiched between Degrassi and Apt like he was for much of the first few laps. And I wonder if that contributed to his error, maybe a little bit of overdriving.
I reckon it did for certain, because in a Formula E race generally, you definitely have to have your wits about you. It's close walls, plenty of action, plenty of other drivers, but especially in conditions like those, and the fact that accidents were breeding other accidents and people were... I wouldn't say that they were trying banzai moves or anything like that, but they were definitely going for it. Some of them weren't deterred by the deteriorating weather conditions and thought, hey, here's my chance. I'll try and work my way up the grid, and for some it didn't work. I feel like Dillman was still expecting the level of Formula E racing that he'd seen in many other races and didn't really account for the mistakes that were being made on the track. It seemed like he was almost spooked by it.
Yeah, I probably agree with that. Well, I'm supposed to be talking to Jerry Hughes at some point in the coming weeks, so hopefully I'll be able to get some idea of where they intend to go in the future, because Neo have performed historically well in certain races, mostly through Oliver Turvey in recent years, but this season has been a bit of a downturn in form, but they also seem to have a bit more backing behind them. So I guess it's a question of where they want to go, and whether they see it as being something that they can do in the short term or the long term. So that'll be interesting. But the other thing I wanted to talk about, and it, as I say, a bit of a left field shift, but what I've seen on Twitter is that a lot of people who like Formula E appear to also like other niche interests from the past and present. Things like there seems to be a huge number of Formula E fans who are also Pokemon fans, who have been tweeting about Detective Pikachu, the new film. And there seems to be a whole bunch of Formula E fans, as we will discover in future podcasts, who are also huge fans of classic racing video games such as Wipeout, F-Zero, etc. Essentially, there seems to be a lot of people who know their stuff about things that maybe in the 90s would have been considered a little bit nerdy, but now have moved into popular culture. Do you think it's just that Formula E attracts people who like these fringe things, and should this be the kind of fan that Formula E is appealing to, the kind of science fiction, anime, video gaming sort of fan?
Well, Formula E is the most sci-fi of all the racing series at the moment because it's the newest technology. It's electric technology, which is new and exciting for a lot of people. It's definitely, I'd say it's intriguing people that aren't necessarily F1 fans, aren't even necessarily fans of racing, that they might have just seen it in the past and thought, hey, there's a lot of drama going on here, and this is a new type of machine that I haven't really seen much about before, and are intrigued about. One thing that I have noticed is that, well, Formula E gives a lot more drama than Formula One. Look at modern Formula One today or other series, and it's just hard to get with it when you see racers like China that are just incredibly dull. There's not much going on. Whereas in a Formula E race, can we even think of a Formula E race that has ever taken place that has been boring?
Well, I'm sure maybe if you look back to season 1, you can, but it's hard to think. Yes.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's just boring races are an absolute anomaly, even if they happen at all. And that's the thing with people that I'd say watch things like Pokemon, watch anime. From experience, when I was a kid, you just want to see constant drama. You want to see everything going on. You want to see wild craziness and all this new machinery that you see loads of different things going on with. And Formula E perfectly encapsulates that into racing. So if there's a lot of fans of, say, anime shows or sci-fi that are getting into Formula E, I'd say it's quite understandable because of that.
Yeah. And were you a fan of Pokemon back in the day?
Oh, certainly so. I mean, I still play it sometimes now.
Yeah. So I guess you watched the cartoon series as well then?
Yeah, I grew up on that. And I also watched some other anime series. I mean, I watched like Sonic X when I was a kid. I absolutely loved that. And yeah, that helped me get into racing a bit more as well, obviously, because of the speed thing.
I mean, surely Team Rocket must have had some kind of big budget behind them because, you know, I think there were episodes where they were moderately successful, but surely not enough to keep the backing of their alleged financial backer, Giovanni, the gym owner. I wouldn't have thought.
Yeah, I definitely see a lot of resemblance between them and Nissan right now. In fact, if anything, think about Carlos Ghosn within Nissan as well, who has actually been arrested.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean,
think about that.
And yeah, in fact, we will think about that, but not talk about it for legal reasons. But yeah, absolutely. This is great. What were your favourite racing video games growing up? Did you have any?
Oh, I certainly did. I had so many racing games. I had Gran Turismo 4 and 3. I had all the Need for Speeds. I even had the Beetle Challenge for the N64 and V-Rally 2.
Right. And which is the best Need for Speed in your opinion?
Best Need for Speed would have to be the original Most Wanted.
Okay. Why? What was especially good about that?
I enjoyed Underground 1 a lot, but Need for Speed Most Wanted, basically, that's when you had the supercars back again, along with the customization of the normal cars. And it's the fact that for the first time within a Need for Speed game, you had that mix of you could drive a Fiat Punto or a normal car and then customize it, or you could drive a supercar. You had open world, you had the police chasing you. It was just great for me. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
And I don't think they've done it as well since.
I mean, there was that period in Formula One gaming in the 90s when Bernie was less precious about his licensing, when you could actually get some very good indie Formula One games. Jeff Crammond's Grand Prix for me was my favourite for many years. Then obviously Grand Prix 2, 3 and 4, also fantastic. But the thing that stood out really about those games was the way that there wasn't that much in the way of detail because texture mapping was quite new to games in those days. But what you had to do was use your imagination. So if you wanted a career mode, well, you actually had to log the points from the previous season and type in the names for the driver changes and possibly download skins for new helmets. It's all got a lot easier these days with the Codemasters F1 game offering career mode and offering helmet changes, etc. as part of the package. Do you find that because all these things have got easier, somehow it's taken some of the magic out of gaming?
Not particularly. I mean, I haven't really known much, even as a retro gamer, outside of the Cody's F1 games. But I'd say that the fact that it's more streamlined has made it a lot more easy for people to get with, and it's a part of hooking people on Formula 1 easier, that they can play the games, that it's a lot more streamlined than it was, and can get people to bother with Formula 1 instead of just trying the game for a day or two and then switching it off.
Yeah.
One thing I am interested to know is, what is your favourite Codemasters F1 game?
Okay, well, I have fairly limited experience with them, but the first one I bought was F1 2013, and that was, I think, around the time when DRS first came in, if I'm not wrong. Yeah,
that was 2011, around there.
Right. So in F1 2013, which came out in 2012, you had things like the young driver test, where you'd have to drive between cones and you'd have to practice with the DRS to make sure you released it in the right place, etc. And coming from the more retro F1 games where you just had to accelerate, brake and steer and remember when and how to change gear and then read your telemetry afterwards, I found the whole thing utterly baffling and was able to sympathise with Felipe Massa because I remember when he was at Ferrari and DRS first came in, he said something to the press like, "There are way too many buttons these days, and I don't know what to do with them." So that's been my recent experience when people have invited me round and got me to play the Cody's games. That it's just been too much to focus on and too much to look at. I would love to have someone like Arava on this podcast because he can explain to me how he mastered all that multitasking that's needed to be done in a Formula One e-cockpit these days. But how do you feel about all that multitasking?
I'm perfectly fine with it. I like the challenge, to be honest. It's not something I'm particularly great at, but I like trying to get better and better at it because it really challenges me.
Yeah.
My favourite Codemasters F1 game has to be F1 2016 because that's where I feel they nailed the physics best, and you were able to do manual starts, like doing the formation lap and building up to the grid. I just thought it was brilliant, and even though they've had a lot more features in the game since then, the actual core game I don't think has been as good since.
By the way, I'm wrong about 2013 coming out in 2012 because that's how FIFA works, isn't it? With the following.
With F1 games, it used to come out, I believe, in the autumn, but now it does the summer even earlier.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Which puts apparently massive pressure on developers. I've heard tales from various software houses about people working 100-hour weeks to try and get these things out and whatever. And I can imagine that that's cranked up even more with people expecting early releases these days. But how much do you feel that we've become, if you like, free beta testers while they release DLCs because the release is so early these days?
I do believe that we are somewhat, and I think that we're all, well, at least the vast majority are happy to do such but I think the only time that it's really been too much to bear was F1 2015, which was incredibly buggy and I don't know if you've heard of the game Sonic 06 and the reputation that holds, but that was like Codemasters' Sonic 06 moment. That's the only way I can really put it. It was incredibly buggy and
I am aware.
It should have been delayed.
I am aware of Sonic 06. Actually, the Sonic franchise has got to be one of the most fudged up franchises in history. Given the property that Sega had, it's almost impossible to get wrong a game where you run around with a hedgehog through a pinball like landscape, and yet Sega have managed to get it wrong so many times over the years, haven't they?
Yeah, it's actually surprising that they managed to get 2D games wrong. not really surprised at 3D because it's actually a series that's really hard to do in 3D. But yeah, with the Codemasters F1 games, I do feel that with DLCs that they can try out different things. And one thing I do want to get into is I'm willing to be more patient, certainly, and I think a lot of us would be if it means that we get a better product of game. And just even from a humane perspective, knowing that the devs aren't working themselves to death over it, because when Assassin's Creed had their downfall a few years back and they took a break for a year, they brought a game out 2 years after the last one, and they did the same with Need for Speed when that got dry. The problem is with FIFA and F1, you have to do it each year. There can't really be a break, so they don't even have that luxury.
Do you think that this is a consistent thing, whatever you're creating, that when you have followers, when you have fans, you feel the need to create more and more until you work yourself into the ground? And what is the way of stopping us from doing this, do you think?
It can easily become that way, and I think the way of stopping it comes down to the people who are enjoying the content. People like Chamber, Stuart, who runs it, and obviously Sean running the F1 word, and even Jonty to an extent with his videos, because I've seen people badgering him to make videos sometimes, is that we've just got to be grateful for the content that they do put out and be able to give them time. If we keep inundating them with asking them questions and so on and so forth, and to a lesser extent, sometimes forgetting to be able to, to congratulate them on their work. I just feel that it starts to lose that human aspect, and they start to feel like they have to push out content. They're just a content creator first, a human second, and it's a rough game. It's something that I certainly feel for them for, because as I've seen, Sean's starting to fall out of love with the content he's creating, and he's trying to think of new ways to create content that's more enjoyable for him, which I'd love to see him do first and foremost. And the fans of his channel need to realise that it might change, and if it does change to something that he enjoys, that's what's got to come first and foremost.
Well, yeah, I think possibly Stuart Chainbear will reflect that one of the best things he did was take effectively a 1 or 2 month break from doing F1 videos, because his graphic design style of videos, his cartoon style is, I would guess, incredibly labour intensive to make as well.
Yeah, certainly. So I've seen his art, I've seen his content creating, and even so much as when he was doing the quiz show, which I greatly enjoyed. There were some criticisms about the way he did that and the way he organised his slides, and that things were difficult to read. And I just thought, even when he's given an explanation, there's been people who have been rudely asking him this and requesting that he changes it. And I'm just thinking, the content creators already compromising their time and their life to be able to push out this content for people who want to see it. The last thing they need is rude comments and intense pressure from people to change this and that, which is perfectly fine to live with. And I just feel like the expectations, even coming to the official F1 channels, when they were broadcasting the Brazilian Grand Prix, the 1991 race, and they did highlights, there were a lot of people who I thought were incredibly ungrateful, saying that they should have put on the full race. The thing is, those people who make those Formula One videos might not have the wealth of archive footage there to be able to do that at the drop of a hat. And the fact is, they're trying to step up their content creating, and I think that's impressive. And just, I don't get why people can't just accept being happy with that. We're already getting quite a lot.
Well, yeah. I mean, coming back to 1991, as I said before, that is one of my favourite eras of Formula One. I was lucky enough to be around for it in person. I imagine you probably weren't, Conrad, but
I was 8 years off.
Yeah, I mean, 1991 was a great season. 1990 actually was even more fun, because you had the kind of I guess probably would call it now bitching between Alain Prost and Nigel Mansell in terms of...
that was when the rivalry heated up most, wasn't it?
Yeah, and this is what I mean when actually you tweeted that people should get off Sebastian Vettel's back, I think, the other week, and that actually he's a lot better driver than he seems. And I think somehow we got into a comparison with previous eras of driver. I mean, Prost, obviously a deeply political animal throughout his career, but in that 1990 season, he didn't just have to contend with Senna at his absolute godlike peak, but he also had to contend with Nigel Mansell not necessarily producing the goods that season, but complaining a lot about changes of engineer, about him feeling like a number two driver, etc., and not really respecting team orders when they came in at the end of the season. So Prost had a tough season, and to take it through to Japan and that famous crash and be able to challenge Senna, I think I'm not convinced it's something Sebastian Vettel would be able to do.
The point I was trying to make with that post was, disclaimer here, I do think Alain Prost is better than Sebastian Vettel. In fact, I might get some flack for this. I think Alain Prost overall was better than Ayrton Senna. I genuinely do. The point I wanted to make with Sebastian Vettel is his results over the period of time he's been in Formula One are around there or even above Alain Prost. That's not necessarily to say he's better, because I don't believe that in a million years. It's more that people are tarnishing Sebastian Vettel's legacy because of one or two seasons of mistakes, which I just feel is incredibly unfair, because even Lewis Hamilton had that in 2011. The point I just wanted to make is that, like it or hate it, Sebastian Vettel's career is up there with the very, very best, at least on paper, and deserves a lot more respect. And by comparing him to someone who is widely respected like Alain Prost and saying, well, he might not necessarily be better, but his career statistics are right up there with him. He hasn't got there by accident.
This is true. I mean, I think the reason why the Prost comparison came in was because they're the drivers on 4 world titles, aren't they?
Yeah, and it's also that they're actually incredibly well matched, because Sebastian Vettel has one more win, 52 to 51 or 53 to 52.
The severe increase in the number of Grand Prix in a season in recent years has made it more statistically difficult to compare drivers. But I do certainly get your point, and I think possibly the unfair maligning of Vettel on the internet is one of the reasons why he's perhaps seemed a bit more introspective this season. He doesn't seem like the same driver who was willing to give interviews to everyone at Red Bull, for example.
It's come to the point where it's just become such a talking point within the media, and I understand that it's necessary for people to comment on it, like Jolyon Palmer, because I remember him getting a lot of flack for discussing the whole situation. People were saying, well, with the career you've had, you can't judge. And I thought, that's ridiculous. On the other hand, some of the reporting I've seen, especially from Sky in Bahrain, which I thought was quite frankly disgraceful, I understand why Seb's taking a different approach with the media, and he's less happy to engage, and why he wants to shut off, and he doesn't have social media, because if he did, it'd be absolute hell right now for him. And he's got to find a way to be able to turn this round, and he's not going to do that when he's got a multitude of different microphones held in his face, asking him once again, why is he under pressure and why has he bottled it?
Of course, in Formula E, that's not an option, and Formula E is run as such a tight ship. Drivers have even been fined for turning up 11 minutes late to autograph sessions or wearing the wrong underwear, that kind of thing. So, the idea that a driver could skip interviews because he was feeling a bit down or a bit introspective. You wonder how much this constant scrutiny that comes with being a Formula E driver on a Formula E weekend actually messes with their heads sometimes. It's not something I can judge, but what's your opinion?
I just feel that in Formula E, there is still some pressure. I mean, all we've got to do is look back at season 3 and the way that Sebastian Buemi exploded, but I don't think the media played particularly much into that. And I think Formula E reporters on the whole have been more respectful towards the drivers and less likely to try and get a controversial soundbite. The Formula E drivers are generally more expressive anyway, what I've noticed. They're generally a lot more open and expressive, and I think that also comes from drivers like, say, Lucas Di Grassi, Robin Frains, being happy to share blows on social media and be able to give interesting conversations with reporters on their own.
Another thing which I would praise Formula E for is keeping a consistency in the presenting team. I mean, obviously, congratulations to Nikki Shields going off on maternity leave pretty soon. But but by having her as the main interviewer ever since the start of Formula E, I think that it led to situations like with Daniel Abt yesterday, where he was able to share a joke before answering her question, that kind of thing. I mean, it's not the closeness that you get with Formula One drivers and their reporters, is it?
Yeah, I don't even think it's comparable. Formula E is just so much more close knit. I almost feel like they kind of have to be, because it just feels like this. We're all in it together, apart from certain moments. Whereas F1 feels a lot more detached. That a lot of people are playing, like the individual game, where they don't really stretch beyond their own team and their own social media. Whereas a lot of Formula E drivers try to think about the series as a whole.
Yeah. All right. Well, the Formula One race is about to start, so I'd better let you go and watch that, Conrad. But thank you so much. If you want to catch Conrad O'Keefe's work, he's on eracing.net, and he has written something about Paris, I think, haven't you?
I'm going to be writing that in the next couple of days. It's not actually up yet.
Okay, brilliant. So what kind of angle will you take with that?
I'm just interested to see how the Gen 2 cars are working and attack mode and things like that. So I'd like to do a mid-season review, see how they're faring.
Okay, good one. And I'm Stuart Garlick. My work is available on eMotion. That's medium.com/e-motion. And you can tweet me e_motion FE. So thank you very much. And to anyone who's listening, we'll see you next time. Goodbye.